Every culture has its myths about death, its stories of what comes after breathing your last and crossing the threshold into the eternal unknown. Some say there are pearly gates, others promise reincarnation, a return to the cycle of life. But in the dark corners of ancient lore, there exists something far more unsettling: the underworld. A place of shadows, suffering, not life, not peace, just an endless void of torment. And sometimes the veil between our world and theirs becomes thinner than anyone is prepared for. This is the true story of those who dared to cross it. It begins in Greece, the land where myth and reality blur at the edges. Professor Evelyn Carter had spent her life chasing ancient legends, exploring tombs, deciphering inscriptions, and theorizing about the forgotten pathways into Hades itself. Her fascination wasn't unique. Hundreds of archaeologists had combed through the caves and ruins of Greece looking for Persephone's stolen realm or the Styx's flowing pitch-black waters. What made Evelyn different, though, was her belief that mythology wasn't just storytelling cloaked in metaphor. She believed it was a map. For 20 years, she followed fragments of text in old scrolls, deciphering symbols hidden on pottery shards, linking them with physical geography. What she finally discovered chilled her to the bone. Deep in the shadowy folds of the Taygetos Mountains lay a cavern that fit every description she had gathered. The Greek locals called it Skotenos Abyssos, the dark abyss, a place whispered about only in warnings and prayer, its mouth stretched open like a beast's jaws, emitting a cold wind even in the summer heat. Villagers refused to approach it, swearing they could hear weeping on moonless nights. Evelyn wasn't so sure if all the stories were folklore anymore. She figured she'd found it, the doorway to the underworld. Evelyn gathered a small team to investigate, a group of seasoned spelunkers, herself and her assistant Daniel. It was dangerous work, venturing underground in an uncharted cavern. She tested radio frequencies, mapped out emergency routes, and carried backup lights and ropes. But no amount of preparation, not science, not logic, nothing, could have prepared them for what actually waited beyond. The descent began harmlessly enough. The cavern was damp, with slick limestone walls covered in ancient graffiti that seemed to depict mourning figures, chains, and skeletal hands. As the team moved deeper, Evelyn noticed odd symbols etched more frequently into the stone: circles, jagged lines, and, disturbingly, spirals that always seemed to be following her no matter the direction she looked. Daniel wasn't comfortable. He'd complained about the ominous feeling ever since they entered, claiming the air felt heavier the farther they went. It was faint at first, whispers, or what felt like whispers. He tried dismissing it as airflow colliding through narrow passages, but Evelyn heard them too. The team pressed forward, putting their faith in the lines of rope connecting them to the entrance above, tethering them like lifelines in a sea of shadow. Hours passed as they climbed and crawled through narrow throat-like tunnels. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Their breaths started to linger in the air, despite the warm summer above ground. But it wasn't just the temperature. Evelyn noticed something chillingly unnatural. A faint blue luminescence began creeping into the cracks of the rocks around them. It wasn't phosphorescent algae. She'd seen bioluminescence before. No, this light pulsed, like veins carrying blood. That's when the noises began. Not whispers this time, no. Groaning, low and rumbling like animals trapped far underground. The others chalked it up to seismic activity or gusts of wind, but only Evelyn knew for sure. The animal-like sounds matched descriptions she'd read in esoteric texts about the cries of the damned. Still, she pushed onward. Her obsession was unstoppable. They were approaching what she theorized would be a central opening where the underworld's river might flow. The smell hit them first: sulfur, acrid and foul like decayed flesh rotting in stagnant water. The narrow passage expanded suddenly into a great echoing chamber, too large for their headlamps to illuminate fully. And in the center of it was a black pool. It didn't ripple, reflecting nothing despite their lights. It looked alive. Evelyn's heart raced. Was it the Styx? It had to be. Against all odds, she'd found it. Daniel spoke shakily behind her. "Do you feel that?" he asked. She did. The air wasn't just heavy anymore. It felt like it was pressing against them from all sides, as though unseen claws grasped at their limbs, their faces. The light pulsing from the walls grew stronger, expanding to cover more of the cavern in tendrils of glowing veined streaks. Evelyn finally noticed what no one else had yet. There were faces in the walls, frozen screaming faces, mouths stretched wide, silently wailing figures carved into the rock. No, not carved, molded, the walls were alive. One of the spelunkers panicked, his voice trembling too hard to form coherent words. He backed away toward the cavern entrance, but before he could make it 3 steps, the black pool rippled with unnatural movement. From its surface rose a pale hand, skeletal but wet, covered in what looked like dripping tar. The man froze, and then, before Evelyn could shout for him to run, the hand shot forward faster than anything could move in water. Its bony claws wrapped around the man's neck and pulled him downward. He didn't even have time to scream before the blackness swallowed him. The liquid surface returned to stillness. The team erupted into chaos. They stumbled backward, arguing frantically about leaving, running for the surface. Evelyn barely managed to pull herself together long enough to grab them by their packs and rally them back toward the narrow tunnel. But the cavern didn't want to let them go. One spelunker tripped, and before anyone could help him up, the glow began wrapping around his shoes, then his legs, dragging him screaming toward the hungry walls. The rock pulsed as if it were laughing, laughing and watching. Evelyn screamed, pulling Daniel into the tunnel, desperate to escape. Behind them, the sounds became unbearable. Shrieks, groans, the gargled cries of their lost team as darkness consumed them. They didn't stop running until daylight hit their faces. The villagers found them on the mountain 3 hours later, mud-caked, shivering from cold and unable to speak. The authorities retrieved nothing but rope and shredded equipment from the cavern. No bodies were ever found. Evelyn and Daniel spent years unraveling their sanity after the journey. Both would wake up sweating in the middle of the night, hearing faint whispers or low groans right outside their windows. Evelyn retired from archaeology, but some nights she swore her breathing grew heavier in certain distant corners of her house, as though the air still carried the weight of death. The locals sealed Skotenos Abyssos with concrete soon after. They knew the truth. Nobody dances with the underworld and returns unscarred.